you show up. Our little Dharma booster shot on Sundays. I know why I show up. It's amazing to me how, these opportunities to spend time with others to discuss these golden teachings, how it lifts my heart, even when it exhausts me, even when I just, feel like, oh, it takes so much energy to be mindful of all the things that we're trying to be mindful of. But it's, even when I have if my mind is caught up in negativity or worry or, all the other things it can be full of, that's equally exhausting. So, much better to spend my energy trying to transform my mind in skillful ways. So take a moment to really think about your presence here. Be aware of your body here. And try to generate a meaningful intention to use your time well. And by meaningful, I just mean that something that is coherent with, or what's the word, congruent with the reason you show up, so that, if you show up to kind of give yourself a booster shot of wanting to keep this alive in your mind of compassion and love and patience, all our good qualities. Even when we're facing difficult circumstances. So using our time in this way, really helps us with this. Serves as a mindfulness bell. And sharing time with others who know it's not easy to do. But that it can be done. If we have some self-compassion, self-care, patience. So we'll recite our refuge prayer for those so inclined, and then the 4 immeasurables. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. And may all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. So we've been talking about what qualities support the mind of joy or contentment, that help us be aware that even in difficult times, there are moments of contentment to be found, and that these are from within. So we have to cultivate it, really be mindful so that we don't miss these opportunities. And so we looked at how perspective can help with this, how being able to step back from our own, sort of narrow focus on our own lives and our own conditions and circumstances, but being able to step back to include more beings, recognize we're part of a much larger group, understanding that we certainly aren't the only ones having difficult times, and perhaps give us an ability to, let go of that tight grasping, that why me? We looked at humor, how that can help, humility, and acceptance. Acceptance that difficult situations come and go, that our conditions don't really change due to our wisdom, but our experience of them can change from our wisdom. I don't think we're all muted. Joy, can you mute your microphone? Thank you. Trying to think of what the other qualities are. Compassion and generosity. We're on compassion. Generosity will be I think the last one.
Gratitude.
I'm sorry?
Gratitude.
Oh yes, gratitude. Absolutely. Are there others? The mind is like a soothe. Forgiveness. And these, of course, all work together. Sort of, we can see how acceptance of our limitations, of the fact that we make mistakes, can help us with forgiveness for ourselves and others. Acceptance, that the resistance to what's happening really doesn't help, deal with what's happening. We just have to accept sort of what's happening and then figure out how to deal with it. So, and the more we can support all of these, every moment with compassion for everybody, understanding that we suffer and, from countless different conditions, but the suffering is not so different. The experience of suffering is the same, and wanting to see others not suffer, is just an extension of wanting ourselves not to suffer. That suffering is, why not be rid of it? And then accepting that our suffering is generated from within, so that there are things we can do to help reduce our suffering. There are ways in which we can work with our conditions in order so that they don't affect us as deeply. And so equanimity is sort of at this base of loving kindness, universal loving kindness and compassion. This recognition that the way we judge others, like put them in categories of friends, enemies, and strangers, is really about whether we see them as helping us or harming us in this moment, or a series of moments, or this period of time, and that's not a really sound basis for feeling compassionate and loving kindness for others, because those things change. And the more we cultivate this sort of just sincere connection with all living beings, that we all suffer, that we all don't want to suffer, the less we will suffer. So how do we grow our equanimity? How can we, it's not like we're trying to abandon friends or not recognize that we have preferences, but that those reasons, even the reason of it's my family, I'm going to put my family above all others, is really not a sound basis if you step back and have the perspective that everyone is someone's child. And when we're not around our loved ones, don't we want others that are around them to treat them with compassion and love? So in the same way, we want to bring that energy to our interactions, with those who don't fall into that category of my friends, my family, my loved ones. We can start to develop this understanding that the minds of compassion and love are how we can protect ourselves. If we can connect with others, not necessarily in words or deeds, most of the world are strangers to us at this moment. But if we can, keep cultivating this sense of interconnection, interdependence, of the sameness in wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, that protects us from feeling, that someone's harming us on purpose, or someone's, doing this, or that we can't tolerate this situation or that situation, In other words, we don't have to be, take everything so personally. Because most of the conditions of the world really aren't about us. Even when someone's yelling at us, that's really a reflection of of some suffering that they're experiencing. And they're just trying to, like we do most of the time, we want to put it on someone else. My suffering is someone else's fault. So I'm going to, act out from that place, that belief. It doesn't mean we don't, let people know that it's not okay to treat us unkindly or with harsh speech or all those things, that's, that will never get anywhere if you yell at me, kind of thing. But if we do it from a place of real compassion, if we understand that this person is suffering, and that wanting them to develop kind speech, or the opposite of harsh speech, is a compassionate wish for them, because they will also suffer less. That doesn't mean we say to them, you'd feel a lot better if you just didn't yell at me, All of us, we have to develop our own kind speech, our own ability to hear someone's suffering so that they feel acknowledged, recognized. But we can walk away from harsh speech and inappropriate actions of body. But the question of whether or not we write someone off as, not worth something, and we really want to think about that. Yes, Francesca.
So what if you were to say it in a nice way that you understand how they're feeling, coming from a compassionate point of view, that, you're assuming that they're suffering, like, okay, you're suffering and I understand you're suffering and I'm compassionate to your, but is that just assuming? Like they'll think that you're just assuming they're suffering. They may not be ready to accept that you've.
None of this is out loud, Francesca.
Or a note or something.
But none of this has to be out loud.
Right.
It's really about you.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about changing them.
Right.
So come back to you. So just come back. Okay, how can I think of this person as suffering? How can we do that? What helps us, think that it's a pretty good assumption?
By their actions, by their anger, by their...
How do you know, though, that that's what it means?
Because it's how I felt before when I was acting like that.
Exactly. Because we've been there.
Right. Mm-hmm. Most people are suffering. So there you go.
But also, when people yell at people, that screams suffering.
Yes.
They're not happy about something. And they're blaming someone else for it. Maybe you. Or maybe they're just yelling because they're mad at the world.
Or they're passive aggressive in some ways by just ignoring you.
And that's not suffering at all.
It is.
It is suffering. So you have to quit thinking, this isn't about, oh, I'm judging this person to be this way, because, it's really about how can I work with my heart, my mind, to respond in a skillful way without thinking about, whether it's an effective strategy so they'll treat me better. Where you just stay with your heart and develop an ability to respond to people's acting out behavior, with a heart that is open to their suffering. that they're, whether it's a small suffering or big suffering, you know, but basically like a 2-year-old who's not getting what they want. That doesn't change the 2-year-old's suffering in that moment. You know, the tantrum mind, they are suffering. And it doesn't matter whether the 2-year-old is right or not.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they know that you know that they're suffering.
Right.
Is what
It doesn't mean, because you still have to respond appropriately to a 2-year-old to keep them safe and to keep them, you know, to help them chill out. You know, because you're the parent. But if you're not dealing with your own, you know, with a child, you know, we're not, we're not parenting other people. It's more about ourselves. How do we respond? We're trying to reduce our suffering because that's all we have control over. But through our behavior, our ability to reduce our suffering, that's going to help others because we won't be yelling at them. But how we respond in any given situation is going to depend on the situation, depend on what's happening. But we want to come from a place from within that recognizes that this event has its root in suffering, in self-grasping. And one of the ways we do that is really, like Paul said, we know that that's how I act. You know, and I know that when I act that way, you know, there's something that's bothering me, or I feel like I'm not getting something I want, or, you know, I'm suffering. I'm just in a bad place, you know, and so, you know, we just don't deal with things very well in those times. And if someone doesn't have any tools to work with those things, then compassion certainly is a great place to start. You know, just understanding that they're suffering, that yes, we can choose to make ourselves suffering by taking it on and going, oh yes, it's my fault. I deserve to be yelled at, you know, whatever way we do that. But I'll have, and it probably depends on the circumstances. But the main thing we want to work on is our response. Now, when we're in relationship with people, we can talk to each other, have conversations with each other, intimate conversations, revealing conversations to help reduce the amount of acting out in our own homes, just like we do with children. But not in the same way we do with children. But this is how we build harmony in the household. We listen. We hear the suffering that's behind the words, or the joy that's behind the words. Depends on the conversation, doesn't it? But we have a strong habit of wanting to turn situations around to be about their change. The other needs to change. And that again is thinking that happiness and contentment and comes from other. So we first want to work with our own suffering, our own unhappiness. And recognize it is from within. So the more that we can be present with someone else's suffering, with a mind that just doesn't get hooked with self-grasping. The mind that thinks, oh, this is all about me and they're wrong. It's all about them. So, the more we can just respond, the less, we manipulate ourselves into an unskillful reaction. The more our buttons are pushed, so we have to habituate ourselves to a different idea. Right now we tend to defend ourselves against other people's suffering when it's coming, when it's directed towards us. And we can still defend ourselves with the mind of compassion and love. This person who's just like me is suffering in this moment. And just like me, they want to be free of the suffering. And just like me, they're mistaken about how to do it. Because we're familiar with that. So the more that we're aware of our own stuff, we just need to apply it to the situation for us to remind ourselves, oh yeah, that's right. I have bad days too. But we'll have fewer of them, the more we can just respond with, I'm in the presence of a suffering sentient being. How can I not add to their suffering? So what the Buddha said is that in order to be able to grow this, this from our compassion that we have for loved ones or vulnerable ones, or however, however it works for us, having loving kindness, how we grow that beyond the borders of our preferences, of me and mine, and the me and mine of those that we love, because we do spread it out a little bit, don't we? We don't want the loved ones of our loved ones to suffer either, unless we don't like those people. Then we kind of want them to suffer and go away. But, so we want to change that attitude. So how do, so it's, the teachings say, it's really helpful to have very concrete reflections, that you don't just, wouldn't it be nice, and we'll all stand around on a hilltop and drink Coca-Cola, and sing, that we don't want to go about it that way, because it's not effective. It's one of those, you have one of those moments when you hear it or whatever that's really useful, because you can draw from that moment. But in order to make it just arise naturally, without the music and without the scene being played, when you can have it when chaos is reigning, is that you start with very specific things. So I'll give an example of this. All right, so take a moment. We're going to do, a meditation. This is not a meditation, just sort of a, where is it? I've lost it on my screen. I'm always doing this. Well, isn't this ridiculous? I promise you, I was looking at this 5 minutes ago. Well, no, that's not right. An hour ago. Okay, we'll see if I can do it without my crutch. There. I'm always so afraid that I'll just completely blank out and just kind of go, oh, what was I thinking? Which I do in teachings. So, you know, it's not like a ridiculous thought. It's just a suffering thought. Okay. Okay. So what I want you to imagine, because this kind of fits the season, even though none of us will experience the season in this way of Thanksgiving and Christmas. So, but just try to imagine, to kind of go within for a minute, to your mind's eye. And so imagine you're inviting friends over for dinner, and you're inviting just the people you like. So imagine you've called them up or emailed them, how it feels when they say, yes, that works for them. And then imagine how you feel when things are ready to receive your guest. And then they start arriving, and every time you open the door is someone you know and like. So picture specific people that you would invite over, that are your friends. And think about how you want the evening to go well, that everybody have a good time, enjoy the company, the food. And perhaps while you're mingling, you learn of some suffering that someone's experiencing, some event, and how you wish them, you know, that this will lighten soon. If someone's ill, that they will get well soon, that they have the support they need. If they're concerned about a child, that your heart reaches out to them. But there are also moments of laughter, perhaps some stories of shared experiences. And taking these friends to spend a moment wishing them well right now. Just picture them. And have good wishes for them, that they're all healthy or have what they need, that their hearts are peaceful and content. May they be free of suffering. Now think of the loved ones of your friends. Their children, their partners, their parents, their nieces and nephews, whoever. Let's think about their loved ones. If you have specific names or faces, allow those to arise in your mind. And really wish them well. Wish them to be free of suffering. And wishing them just to have whatever they need, support, kindness, resources. Knowing that they do have times of need. Now imagine these loved ones, your friends. Invite friends over for dinner. These are the people who support them, who are kind to them. They enjoy. Now you may not have any faces or any names. But they're not too distant from the people you care about, your friends. But just imagine any sufferings they might experience. The illnesses, the flat tires, the whole range from trivial suffering to devastating suffering. And to wish them to be free of that suffering, to have the tools to help them, to have the tools to create the causes of happiness. Be free of the causes of suffering. So now just return to your friends in this group. With your eyes open, seeing them. Because they're all in little boxes on your screen. So this is a way, we can work with it by just, you can just take one person and then you imagine the friends of that person or the loved ones of that person. And then you imagine the friends of those people. And then the loved ones of those people. But you have to really work with having a genuine feeling. So you may have to go slowly, and really picture, your friends. And then you have to recall, oh yeah, I remember when so-and-so's, son broke his arm falling off the bicycle, whatever. I mean, so you have to work with real examples that you know of, that you've experienced with them, and see how easy it is, that you felt bad for that son who fell off the bicycle, who broke his arm, and then you think about the friends of that son who also have friends who broke arms and whatever you do these days, skateboarding. Maybe it's not bicycles. Maybe it's those, I don't know what it is these days. Anyway, but in this way, you just keep realizing that all those strangers out there are loved ones of someone, have friends, and you just keep doing that. And it becomes easier to recognize the connection we have with living beings. That they're not, they're not different, we just have preferences, our friends are different. And sometimes we have loved ones that we would have never been friends with if we, in just normal circumstances, but because of an event, they've come into our lives and, and we care for them because of this shared experience. And really, the whole world is full of people that are not so different from us, that are having the same challenges we have, that have the same hodgepodge of skills to respond to those challenges. And that this feeling that we have to guard ourselves, guard our hearts from each other, may be a mistaken strategy. Maybe it's actually opening our hearts and feeling love and compassion that protects us. Because then we won't see people as this, potential enemy all the time. Or the potential person who's going to be an obstacle to me getting what I want. So why don't we break out into groups? Those who want to, those who don't, just stay in the main group. But Nicole, if you can set us up as, I don't know, 4 people or something.
Sure.
For 10 minutes and just talk about what obstacles you see to this, or what openings you might feel about compassion. What are the, how it might work for you, or what you feel, is a block to you to being able to do it. Whatever. Does that make sense, or not enough clarity? Well, we're going to go with it.
Okay, so everyone should see now. Area, click on the link to join, and I'll start the 10 minutes now.
The resources we need when we need them. And these are things we all want. It doesn't mean we don't. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please finish and then I'll ask my question.
So we just, it doesn't mean we don't speak up and try to get, support legislation and policies that we think, are the most effective. or the most kind or the most equitable or whatever it is, the most sane, you know? So we want to use our wisdom that way. But the people involved, there's no reason to fall over into this idea of, you know, they're my enemy and I hate them. And if they just, you know, get it, none of that helps. You know, we'll just trade enemies in the future. Ralph.
So the teaching is very valuable from the 35,000-foot existential level, but what I find is on a practical basis often this can be quite challenging when dealing with individuals primarily, not institutions, individuals that really challenge us in this. So
what do you mean by really challenge us?
Well, I'm subject often to people who have suffered their own trauma, and they tend to exercise their experience on me, right? So
what does that mean?
What it means is that I'm challenged in terms of negotiating with them in a relationship, negotiating a relationship with them. Should I be specific? I don't know if it's...
No, you don't need to be specific.
No.
Okay,
No.
yeah, of course it's challenging. Is it a surprise that it's challenging?
No, it's not.
No.
But what it brings up for me, though, is my, the I, me, my point of view in terms of my sanctity, my sanity, my ability to have my own...
You're in charge of all those things, yeah.
Correct, right? And so... when negotiating in a relationship, I'm thinking now because this is what's great about saying it out loud, right? Because as I start to say it out loud, I start to think a little bit about what it is I'm actually trying to express, and that often solves the problem right then and there. So there are a couple of things that might be involved in terms of letting go of the relationship, drawing boundaries. How to do this all compassionately, so to speak.
So to speak. No, not so to speak.
Right. Well, I'm trying to get used to the language when I say so to speak. I'm trying to find the right semantics. So how to do all of that, or how to negotiate, again, using that word, to peaceful end. I'm not sure
see,
exactly
there you go. You nailed it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the obstacle. Right there.
What's that?
What did you just say? To negotiate it to
peaceful end.
A peaceful end. You're grasping at the outcome.
Okay.
If we define a skillful state of mind is the ones that get what we want, we're starting from the wrong place.
Interesting.
You know, it comes back to that. I mean, we all do this. This is part of our challenge, is to recognize, ooh, I am trying to control the outcome, you know, and I want to do it ethically, and I want to do it with compassion and all this stuff, but I still want to control the outcome. So, you know, that is going to contaminate whatever mind we have, because that's about me. That's about what I see as the outcome. You know, and that's a problem. It isn't a ridiculous wish or something. Of course, a peaceful outcome is, you know, we want all of samsara to have a peaceful, but it's not going to happen that way. That's not how it works. All we can do is come from a place of peace, come from a place of compassion, come from a place that's our starting point. The starting point isn't a peaceful outcome. You know, it's really about, I want to walk into this interaction, or, you know, mentally, understanding this is another sentient being who suffers, who doesn't want to suffer, who doesn't know what they're doing about ending suffering. And I can connect with them on that level, just inside ourselves. And then no matter, what we say or what we do, if it doesn't have the outcome that we are hoping, or we just, we get confused, we can keep coming back to this connected place and accept perhaps, this conversation hadn't gone anywhere, whatever, but we cannot feed our frustration or feed our desire for a certain result, all those unskillful things that arise, And, it's not, and that other person probably wants, a certain outcome. And as long as we're grasping at that, we can't see anything in the, in that middle place. Let things bubble up to see how we can approach this. And sometimes, it's really about that, just being able to step back and go, yeah, I don't get it, but I know you want, I know you're trying to reduce your suffering or end your suffering or end the cause of, whatever. I mean, whatever the language that is appropriate to the situation. And we just, we accept that, and we accept that we're not. I had a very good friend who was the chaplain of the Kanapa Center in Raleigh, in North Carolina. And she and I absolutely didn't think anywhere close to the same way. We had the same sort of conclusions of that we want this or that, so our hopes for outcomes were pretty similar, But she would say things at her and go, no, I'm not following you at all. We had strategies about community, trying to develop community care groups and things, and her style of how to go about that, my style of how to go about that, we're just on different pages, different books, maybe different universes, and I just would have to step back and go, well, I knew how compassionate this woman was, and I knew how brilliant she was. And I clearly, I just had obstacles to understanding. And we had to accept that. We had to accept that if we really had to work together on something, we'd have to have a meeting that would take about 2 hours to just even get to what are we trying to discuss. Life is like that.
Thank you. That was very helpful.
Sometimes we might think, oh, this person's just difficult. But really, it's just that you're not getting anywhere. And rather than think that, oh, maybe it's possible not to understand each other, and we have to live with that, we just decide that they are difficult or they're not listening. Or I'm right and they're wrong, in very simple terms. It's very interesting. So we just have to, be open to keeping our hearts open and letting go of the outcome. And most of us find that a bit scary. But as long as we're grasping at an outcome, there's no room for any kind of, connection to make, because the connection is dependent upon a particular outcome. In interactions with people, it's one thing, when you're going to the negotiating table for a contract, to sit there and really, okay, well, these are the things we can perhaps, give a little on and blah, 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 but the bottom line is this, you know, and we can walk away from the table because we don't have to do the deal. You know, but in actual human interactions, there isn't a contract. As all parents, you know, find out that there's no manual. You know, there's no manual for this either. It is because it isn't about getting something we want. It's about being able to have interactions that are based on our values of kindness and compassion, doing no harm. And it's hard. The world wouldn't be such a mess if this was easy. But the Buddha said, the mess is due to the fact that we kind of grasp at this self and what the self wants. And that's mixed with a lot of incorrect information, you know, preconceived notions. And this idea that our happiness and our contentment and our peace of mind and our ease of mind is dependent on external conditions. And it's not. That's one of the fallacies of the way we think. This idea that, well, you know, if they would get their act together, you know, I'd be fine. Or if they just see my point of view, I'd be fine. No, you'd be fine if you worked on your mind. Because the more we can, you know, work on ourselves, and that's when we, you know, when there's doubt there, we can kind of go, oh, maybe, you know, maybe I need to, you know, try to develop more wisdom about this. Maybe my self-interest is creeping in, you know. If you're really mindful of what's going on within yourself, really aware of all the different clues that are going on, and then being determined to change a habit, you know, being determined to try to, okay, I'm going to step back again and again and again from clinging to an outcome, or I'm going to step back again and again from this judgment I have of this person. And I'm going to keep coming back to, you know, wishing them to be free from suffering, connecting that, you know, that we share this, that we're in the same boat, that are trying to, you know, alleviate our suffering. So we can disagree without anger and hatred. That makes sense, sort of. This is hard work. The payoff's huge, though. You know, the less we suffer from this idea that it has to work out according to the way we have, you know, we have in our head, the less we have an idea in our head. And we can just kind of relax into whatever's happening and develop a trust in ourselves of being able to come from, you know, an ethical, compassionate, loving, wise place. And we don't have to be validated by the response of others. They don't have to agree with us. You know, that feeling that sometimes we get when we see a loved one do something again that we know, isn't wise, isn't skillful or whatever. And then they know, and you kind of chuckle and you hug each other and kind of go, yeah, there I am. We want to develop that sense of appreciation for everybody. Just this knowledge that, that we don't know what we're doing most of the time, but we can have a good heart. We can want the best for folks, even with knowing our limitations of knowing what that is. Knowing for ourselves that we don't know what it is. This is why it's so helpful to some, when we talk about, the usefulness of looking at the past, like one of the usefulnesses of looking at the past is looking at really tough times and then recognizing what came out of that was beneficial. What qualities did you develop in yourself? What strengths? What humor? It's just, it's this kind of, that it's, that sometimes the best thing that happened to us in our lives in recent history is something terrible. And then we realize, oh, that got me in a better direction. And that's true for everybody. So we may feel like, oh, we know where this is going to lead. We don't really know. So grasping onto these ideas is not helpful. We need to keep it, to see everything, it's a dependent arising. Depends on all sorts of things, whether it ends well, so to speak, because there's really no end, and then there's just something else. How are we doing? These things are particularly good if you have any family gatherings coming up to really think about, because it's good to practice with people you kind of feel like you know really well. Then of course we discover often that we don't know them as well as we think, but also it's just, we are capable of affection for people who we don't find perfect. And that's good news. It's good news, because then we can have affection for ourselves, even though we're not perfect. Then we can have affection for the world, even though it's not perfect. And it doesn't mean we don't use our voice to speak out against things that we feel are, the wrong direction, the wrong policy, the wrong activity, of course. That's how, it's certainly how a democracy works. That's one of the, the good conditions we have is that we're free to use our voice. So while we have that condition, we should use it to, better the conditions of our citizens and anybody for that matter. Because there are certainly many countries in the world that you don't have that freedom. And people still give their voice. But the risk they take is much greater. So we can at least know that we're taking a risk with a lot less danger.
I think part of what causes some confusion for me, and therefore suffering, is for this, I'll label myself empath codependent, or one who has tendencies, is to draw the proper boundaries, right? To be able to have compassion and loving kindness towards others, but to also be able to draw the line in how it may impact me.
Well, this is where this is recognition of our limitations. Because the truth is, if we take on suffering to the point that we are despairing, that we can't handle it, that doesn't help anybody. it may make us feel good about ourselves because, oh, look at me, you know, I really feel the pain of your suffering. But it's really pain of you suffering that you don't have an answer. So, you know, we really just need to, you know, it's like, maybe you should, Brene Brown has a wonderful little clip of the difference between empathy and sympathy and all these things. And it's helpful because, you know, sometimes our mind goes in a direction that just brings us further and further down and doesn't help anybody in the room, you know, but and being able to come up with these, with a balanced response to compassion and to our limitations, all those things is a very helpful skill to develop. Because some of us are more sensitive, you know. That's just a habit we've brought with us from experiences in the past. But if we think in terms of Buddhism, the teachings of the Buddha, you know, we remember karma and we remember the emptiness of inherent existence, those things can help us too, to not get mired in the suffering of a moment, you know, not to turn it into quicksand, and to help us maintain our perspective, the bigger picture. Because it's true, if we just, you know, go to a place of, you know, confused despair, we can't help. So sometimes we have to just back up, allow ourselves to accept the suffering of sentient beings, understand cause and effect, you know, and then return. And sometimes it just helps to reflect back and just thinking about, oh yeah, comes and goes, doesn't it? It's just, you know, that we've heard the suffering of ourselves and others throughout our entire lives, you know, and this is just, you know, and things change. What you were suffering about 2 years ago is not exactly the same as the suffering you know, the situations change. So we want to make them opportunities to learn to, you know, to be able to create the causes for happiness and not feed our habits that create the cause for suffering. But you know, you just have to keep after it. And then you'd be mindful of the progress that actually is happening. Because sometimes we forget we've made progress. That's the benefit of rejoicing every day. Because then we bring our attention to the progress. But accepting the fact that we're not Buddhas yet is really important.
Changing habit of mind is a journey, that is for sure. Progress, not perfection.
Well, not only that, whatever we're practicing, we get stronger at. You know, Geshe Gelligan, you know, the teacher in North Carolina, he says 3 steps forward. You know, no, he says 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. That's still progress. Because those 2 steps forward mean that you're trying to develop a new habit. you know? So it's just, you know, so if we can recognize every day those little baby steps we do take and go, oh, yay, you know, that's good. Again, not grasping at an outcome. Just because we did good today doesn't mean we'll do good the next time, but that's okay. We want to encourage ourselves to keep wanting to transform our mind, because that's what will carry through over time, you know. So yes, Francesca.
Yes, and I'm thinking like, and also accepting the fact that other people may not be on the path like the one you're on, you know, towards trying to help your mind and understanding compassion and all that. Just keeping that in mind, that they really just are, you know, their ignorance is to the point where they haven't even started working on anything.
Well, they don't know it's possible.
Right.
You know.
So that's a big compassion towards them, and in general, not knowing the possibilities, because they don't even recognize that there's even possibility of helping themselves understand.
Yep. And anybody who's ever overcome a really, you know, a habit that really harms themselves or others, you know, whether it's addiction or anger, or, you know, really understand, you know, how hard that process is, and also how, you know, how wonderful it is that you found tools to help you, you know. And so having compassion for all the people who have not met, either because of timing, you know, or haven't met a teacher that you know is able to connect with them in a way that helps them find their path. You know, it's just, you know, for all of us, for, you know, anybody who's experienced, you know, some change in their lives for the better, and you know, because we had tools. I mean, it's just, you know, we don't do it alone. So it's, you know, we're really fortunate. These are our good conditions as well. So we can rejoice about that and really wish those same kinds of resources for others. Yeah. So. See, kind of can't miss with compassion. We just need to get better at recognizing when we're not truly compassionate. We're just, you know, we'd like everybody to be free of suffering, but preferably you know, according to our own method, you know, so whatever. I mean, we all have these little catches and we want to keep slowly removing them, you know, and just, you know, just get underneath that, find our Buddha potential, let it shine. So, okay, so let's find our, you know, rejoice, you know, in our efforts, that every, you know, step we take in every moment of mind, that we're in the right direction. That's placing positive potentials in our mind stream that will ripen in a positive way in the future. So dedicating helps seal them from being destroyed by, you know, those moments of mind where we're not in the right direction. So let me find the prayer book. This doesn't seem to be my skill this morning, finding anything on my computer. There it is. Don't skip it. So we'll recite Shantideva's wonderful dedication verses, you know, so that we're being generous with our positive potentials and want to share them with others. And then we'll recite the long life prayers for our teachers. Share screen. So our merits are those positive potentials that we put on our mind stream. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of our merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And then for the long, healthy, happy life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, in the land encircled by snow mountains, you're the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. And for the long, healthy, happy life of Lama Zopa Rinpoche, you uphold the subduer's moral way, who serve as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjana's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, please live long. So one